Something just happened, and if even half of it is true, we might be looking at one of the most dangerous moments in global politics right now. Reports are coming in of strikes, ships being hit, a major port connected to global oil routes under fire. And at the center of all this, rising tension between the United States and Iran. Now here's the part that makes this situation different. This didn't start with a single explosion. It started with signals, messages, statements, movements. That may have been interpreted very differently on each side, and that's where things get dangerous. Because in regions like the Strait of Hormuz, misinterpretation can escalate faster than intention. So in this video, we're going to break down what's being reported, what we actually know versus what we don't, and why this moment matters far beyond just one region. Because this isn't just about one strike. This is about how quickly the world can move from tension to something much bigger. Why the Strait of Hormuz matters before we even talk about what just happened. You need to understand where this is happening. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow stretch of water, but one of the most important choke points in the entire world. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes through this single corridor. Think about that. One narrow passage, connecting major oil-producing countries to the rest of the world. Now imagine, that passage becomes unstable. Suddenly, it's not just a regional issue, it becomes a global problem. Fuel prices, shipping routes, supply chains, everything gets affected. And that's why every move in this region is watched closely, not just by governments, but by markets, militaries, and global institutions. Because if something goes wrong here, it doesn't stay here. What triggered the escalation? Now let's slow this down for a moment and really look at what may have triggered this latest escalation. Because situations like this, they don't just appear out of nowhere. They build, step by step, signal by signal. In recent days, there have been multiple statements and reports suggesting an increase in naval activity in the region. Nothing officially labeled as aggressive, nothing openly declared as a direct threat, but enough movement, enough messaging to get attention. We're talking about discussions around escorting commercial ships, providing security in critical waterways, ensuring what's often called freedom of navigation. Now on paper, that all sounds normal, even responsible. After all, global trade depends on safe passage through these routes, and in many cases, naval presence is meant to stabilize, not escalate. But here's where things start to get complicated, because in a high-tension environment, there is no such thing as a neutral move. Every action carries meaning. Every statement sends a signal, and those signals aren't always interpreted the same way by everyone watching. From one perspective, increasing naval presence might look like protection, a way to reassure allies, a way to keep trade flowing, a way to prevent disruption. But from another perspective, that same move can look very different. It can feel like pressure, like positioning, like preparation, or even like a test. And when trust between sides is already fragile, those interpretations matter a lot. Because once doubt enters the picture, every move starts to feel bigger than it actually is. A routine patrol suddenly looks strategic. A defensive measure starts to feel offensive. And communication, instead of clarifying things, sometimes makes them even more confusing. Especially when messages are inconsistent, or unclear, or delivered in ways that leave room for interpretation. That's when each side starts reading between the lines, not just reacting to what is being done, but reacting to what they believe is about to happen next. And that's a dangerous shift, because now you're no longer responding to reality. You're responding to perception, to assumptions, to worst-case scenarios playing out in real time. And history has shown us this is exactly how escalation begins. Not always with clear intent, not always with a deliberate decision to start conflict, but with a series of moves that are misunderstood, misread, or miscalculated. One side acts to protect, the other interprets it as a threat, so they respond, which then confirms the first side's fears. And just like that, a cycle begins, a cycle where each step feels justified, but collectively pushes things closer to the edge. And that's what makes this moment so important to understand. Because what we're seeing right now may not just be about what actually happened. It may be about how those actions were perceived. And in situations like this, perception can be just as powerful as reality. Now let's talk about the part that's getting the most attention right now, the reports of strikes, because this is where things start to feel very real and very serious. Across multiple sources, there are claims emerging that a port connected to major oil infrastructure has been hit. Not just any location, but a site that plays a role in global energy movement. At the same time, there are also reports suggesting that multiple vessels in the region may have been targeted, or at the very least, damaged during heightened tensions. And alongside all of this, we're seeing clear signs that tensions in the region have sharply increased. Now on the surface, that sounds like a major escalation, and it might be. But this is where we need to be careful, because in moments like this, information moves fast, sometimes faster than the facts themselves. Different outlets are reporting different versions of events. Some details are being repeated widely, others are being questioned, and a few are still completely unclear. Which brings us to something really important, something that often gets ignored in breaking situations like this. Accuracy matters more than speed, because when information is incomplete or taken out of context, it doesn't just confuse people. It can actually make the situation worse. Misinformation spreads quickly, and once it spreads, it can influence reactions, decisions, even policy. In extreme cases, it can escalate tensions just as quickly as any physical action. That's why it's critical to separate what is confirmed from what is still developing. Right now, while every detail may not be fully verified, there are strong indications that something significant has taken place. This isn't just noise. This isn't just speculation with no basis. There are enough signals, enough responses, to suggest that this situation is being treated as serious by those directly involved. And you can see that in how governments in the region are reacting. We're seeing heightened alert levels, security advisories being issued, increased monitoring of maritime activity, more caution, more readiness, more attention on what's happening next. These are not the kinds of responses you see over minor incidents. They reflect concern, they reflect uncertainty, and most importantly, they reflect the understanding that this situation could evolve further. And that's the key takeaway here. Even if every detail isn't confirmed yet, even if some reports turn out to be incomplete or partially inaccurate, the overall response tells us something very clear. This moment matters. It's being taken seriously. And when governments start preparing for what could happen next, that's when you know the situation has moved beyond normal tension into something much more sensitive, something that needs to be watched carefully. Because in situations like this, it's not just about what has already happened. It's about what might happen next. The real risk: miscalculation. Now here's the part that often gets overlooked, the part that doesn't make headlines, but quietly sits underneath everything we've just discussed. The real danger here isn't just conflict, it's miscalculation. Because when people think about how wars begin, they usually imagine clear decisions, leaders making deliberate choices, plans being executed step by step. But history tells a very different story. Many major conflicts didn't begin with certainty. They began with confusion, with assumptions, with moments where one side misunderstood the other and reacted based on that misunderstanding. A signal is sent. Maybe it's meant to be defensive, routine, even precautionary. But the other side doesn't see it that way. They interpret it differently, through their own lens, their own fears, their own expectations. And suddenly, that defensive move looks offensive. A routine deployment feels like preparation for something bigger. A warning starts to sound like the beginning of an attack. And in that moment, something shifts. Because now both sides believe they're not escalating. They're responding. Responding to what they think is happening. Responding to what they believe the other side is about to do next. And that's how situations spiral, not through intention, but through reaction. Each move justifies the next. Each response raises the stakes. And before anyone fully realizes what's happening, the situation has already moved beyond control. Now place that dynamic into a region like the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow, heavily monitored waterway, where military assets from multiple sides operate in close proximity, where ships, aircraft, and surveillance systems are constantly active, and where decisions sometimes have to be made in seconds, not hours. In an environment like that, the margin for error is incredibly small. There's very little room for hesitation, very little room for second-guessing, and almost no room for misinterpretation, because one wrong assumption, one misread movement, one signal taken the wrong way can trigger a chain reaction. A warning shot might be seen as the start of something bigger. A maneuver might be interpreted as a threat. A defensive posture might provoke an offensive response. And once that chain reaction begins, it becomes very difficult to slow it down, even if neither side originally wanted escalation, even if both sides believed they were acting carefully. This is the paradox of high-tension environments. The more cautious each side tries to be, the more sensitive every action becomes. And that sensitivity is where the real risk lives, not just in what is done, but in how it's understood. Because in moments like this, perception doesn't just shape the narrative, it shapes reality. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change the course of events. Global consequences. Now let's zoom out, because this isn't just about one region. If tensions continue to rise, the impact could spread globally. Energy markets could react immediately. Shipping costs could increase. Trade routes could shift. And countries far from the conflict could still feel the effects. This is why international attention is so high right now. Because what happens here doesn't stay isolated. It connects to the global system. And when a key node in that system becomes unstable, the ripple effects are everywhere. What happens next? So where does this go from here? There are a few possible paths. De-escalation, through communication and diplomacy. Stabilization, with increased coordination and clarity. Or further escalation, if signals continue to be misinterpreted. Right now, the situation is fluid. Nothing is fully settled. And that uncertainty is what makes it so important to watch carefully, not react emotionally, but understand strategically. Moments like this remind us of something important. Global stability isn't just about power, it's about communication, clarity, and understanding how actions are perceived. Because in high-stakes environments, what you mean and what others hear can be two very different things. And sometimes, that difference is where history changes. If you want clear, grounded breakdowns of complex global events, subscribe to the channel. Because in times like these, understanding matters more than ever.